8:11 in studio right now. In reaction to yesterday's verdict on Kaitlyn Conley, in reaction to the defense attorney who was just on, Frank Policelli, is the district attorney, Scott McNamara. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Thanks for having me.
So this is big yesterday.
It was, I'm very happy for the Yoder family.
Yeah.
It was good for them to be able to get some closure on this. And, they've had two different members of the family be accused of killing Mary. Yeah. So I think it's a good thing for them to move on. And I really hope they can.
So your thoughts on one of the things that Frank Policelli he spoke about last hour, and I do wonder. I mean, he's saying I was defending a murder charge, and all of a sudden at the last hour it's manslaughter. That's what he's going to argue, that it's not within the boundaries of the law. Obviously, you guys feel that it is.
Well, actually, it is. We're always entitled to ask for a lesser included charge if there's a reasonable view of the evidence. And unlike the last trial where Chris Pelly kept out the poisoning of Adam, this case, Frank opened the door in his opening statement. So that all came in. Where it didn't come in, we couldn't get into it the first trial. And so we felt that as a result of that, that if the jury was to look and say, hey, listen, she poisoned Adam and she didn't kill him, she just wanted to get him real sick, maybe she was doing the same thing with Mary. So, I mean, we asked for it. We had talked to a couple of jurors from the first trial, and they had said things that led us to believe they were struggling with the intent to kill. They thought that maybe she just only intended to seriously make her sick. So, I mean, that's why we did it. And I understand he's making the argument we changed it, but that's not true. I mean, any lawyer that's done it for a long time knows that we're entitled to ask for a lesser included, and we often do.
You said you talked to a juror. Why so late in the game to include the charge?
We can't ask for it until after all the evidence is in. We had made a decision after we talked to the juror, like days after the hung jury the first time. We went out, we found the jurors, we tried to figure out what their problem was. We also found out that one of the jurors in that case was actually friends with the Conley family. That was a serious concern of ours. That's why, we made a decision we were going to retry the case. And we also spent a lot of time this time trying to make sure we didn't have the same problem. And we wanted to make sure we got a fair jury, and we needed to, spend a lot of time trying to figure out, what type of juror would be able to do that for us, So, there's a lot that went into it to get up to this trial. So,
if they came back hung, which there was some confusion yesterday because it was tweeted out that hung jury and everybody ran with it. It turns out the judge sent them back in. Had they come back hung, would you have tried her again?
It's hard to say right now, and I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. A lot of things would have went into that. I mean, when the note came out, the judge didn't say publicly what the note said. The note said hung jury, and then it said 10-2 to convict for manslaughter first. So we knew that it was 10-2. And
that's a big number.
That's a big number. And I know he's making allegations that the judge shouldn't have gave the Allen charge, but I got to say, I've practiced in front of Judge Dwyer his entire career as a judge, and I actually worked with him. Judge Dwyer is a by-the-book person, and like when this happens, what happens whenever there's a note or whenever there's indication that you have a hung jury, the judge gives an Allen charge. That's what Judge Dwyer does. So he didn't do anything different in this case than he's done, I don't know, hundreds of times before. Okay. So, he gave the Allen charge, and honestly, they hadn't deliberated that long. I mean, I've had cases, the first trial, they deliberated, I can't remember, 4 or 5 days. I had a trial one time, they deliberated 4 days. So I think it was appropriate that he gave the Allen charge, and, it was 10-2, and, I wasn't surprised, with what happened.
A lot of circumstantial evidence and a lot of evidence that he's poking holes in, saying that you still didn't prove that she was the one searching. You still didn't prove because he had access. Is there? Well, let's address that first.
Okay, sure. I would absolutely disagree with him on that. We spent 2.5 days with an expert and Tony Martino did a phenomenal job. And what happened was after the first trial, the first trial they had an intern test everything. After the first trial, I called Tony in and I said, that's unacceptable. You're doing it this time. And you're going to go through everything that we have, and you're going to do it again. And he did. And one of the things that we didn't find the first time was that what had happened was Adam had downloaded a movie for Katie. And as part of that, he had the option to download her phone, to make a copy of her phone.
Right.
And he chose to. Now, some people might say, that's kind of, slimy. But the bottom line is he downloaded her phone.
My wife would say that's slimy.
Yes. But the bottom line is he did it. And we didn't know about that the first trial. This trial, Tony found it. And what we found was that when Katie had gone to the police, between the time that Adam downloaded her phone and made a complete copy of it until the time she went to the police, she had deleted 4,000 things. So she was trying to erase everything on her phone. There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that anybody used her phone except for her. And as a matter of fact, Frank, during the trial, had kind of like got into it with Tony Martino and was like saying, well, can you do that? Can you do that? So we sent Tony at lunchtime to go do it. He went and looked, and there's something that's called user attribution. So basically what you do is you look and see what's going on around the time that a certain thing happens, and you can kind of...
Well, and I specifically asked that today, and Frank said, no, these were just screenshots. And you couldn't put it into a time frame.
I would disagree with him. The screenshots were all timed. The times of the screenshots match the time on the phone, and you can tell when you can actually tell when that photograph of the screen is taken. There was no evidence whatsoever that anybody used Mr. Adam Yoder 1990 account except for Kaitlyn Conley, and everything about that. And actually there was one thing which was kind of interesting, and a lot of this gets lost when it gets reported out in the media, but there was one thing that happened, and Kaitlyn insisted on trying to change the date that she sent in the anonymous letter. And I suspect the reason for that was because one time that Adam Yoder 1990 account was used to download something, and it was on her phone. So she had to distance herself from that, because if she had any connections to that, she had to keep distancing herself. And the thing too is like, and I know, like Frank has made a lot of comments. I mean, first of all, the first time it was the husband, then the second time now it's the son. I mean, if there was a third time, God forbid, it'd probably be the daughter. The bottom line is,
that is his job, though.
It is. It is his job, but it's not fair to the Yoders.
Right. I understand.
I got to know Bill Yoder, and Bill Yoder's a fine man.
Right.
And you know what Bill Yoder said to me? And he said to me when the jury was deliberating, he says, the worst part about this is that people out there think I wasn't faithful to my wife.
Right.
Because his name was run through the mud the first trial. And, and that's the problem. I mean, this family now has to put it all back together.
Yeah.
I mean, in having two different people being accused of murder, I mean, it's that's tough.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, going back to the investigation, when it started, Adam Yoder was fully investigated. It wasn't like we just said, oh, he couldn't have done it, he's the son. As a matter of fact, it started off with Bill was the suspect. And then because of Kaitlyn's anonymous letter, Adam was the suspect. But all the evidence leads back to Kaitlyn Conley.
Yeah.
Nobody else, including, we called in a witness from California that said the person that she spoke to was a soft-spoken young female who answered the phone. That's what Kaitlyn Conley did at this place.
Yeah.
And that person said, I'm calling about the colchicine order. And here's the thing. Buying colchicine is not a crime. You and I can buy it.
Right.
So why do you go through all this elaborate scheme of using private, like you can actually set up private browsers so nobody can track you? All of these things we wouldn't have known. But to be honest with you, I didn't know you could find all these things out. I thought when you delete your Gmail account, it's gone.
Yeah.
And I think Kaitlyn did too. But what happened was there's certain things in your phone that keep track of things. Like, for example, I didn't know this, but when you delete a picture, a thumbnail stays in your phone. There's a lot of things that I suspect Kaitlyn Conley didn't appreciate was going on inside of that phone that many of us didn't. But
unless you melt your phone and you melt the hard drives and all of that stuff,
there's stuff in there. And here's the other thing too that there's been Frank keeps saying that Adam had access to her phone. Well, there's absolutely no proof of that. And if you paid any attention to all of her interviews or even what she was doing in the courtroom, she has her phone in front of her the whole time. That phone never leaves her hand. So it would be pretty interesting that all of a sudden he has all this access to her phone all these times when she's at work. And the one thing that, I mean, when Mary was poisoned, we know that the onset is 2 to 4 hours. And Adam was in Long Island. And, you know, and Frank keeps coming back, well, he put the colchicine in Mary's pill. The only person that says that is Kaitlyn Conley. But when you look at the colchicine itself, okay, it was found in Adam's car. And the only DNA on that bottle was Kaitlyn Conley's. The only identifiable DNA. And if in Adam's car, as much time as he spends in there,
was there unidentified DNA on there? Also,
but he was excluded.
He was excluded.
He's excluded.
Quickly, I want to ask you. People were throwing around yesterday, of course, you know, conspiracy, and this is one of those cases. This is you're going to be seeing this in a made-for-TV movie. I
Sure.
certainly believe. But is it possible? So unintended manslaughter, it's, without intent. Is it possible that she did intend, and did this ever go through your minds, that she did intend to kill Adam Yoder?
I think she intended to poison Adam the first time, and that's what we put the evidence out there. The problem was she almost got away with it. It was the last vial of blood of Mary Yoder's that we tested for colchicine. That was it. It was the last vial.
Wow.
She almost got away with this. And when Adam was sick, nobody tested for colchicine.
Right.
And we do have his hair, and we looked all over the United States for someone that could test that. We couldn't find anybody.
So you have no proof, though, that he had colchicine poisoning?
We have no proof, but what happened was...
the symptoms seem similar.
The symptoms were exactly the same,
Okay.
and this is what happened. He met Kaitlyn for coffee. She gave him a bottle of pills that had supposed to have 30 pills in it. He took 3. There's 28 pills in the bottle now, so there was an extra pill in there. She sent him a text that says, make sure you take these consistently, okay? For them to work, you have to take them and keep taking them, okay?
You found that
we
text?
have that text,
Yeah.
okay? Now think about this for a second. If I gave you a pills and said, hey, Bill, these pills are really good, am I going to send you a text back and say, hey, did you make sure you kept taking those?
Yeah.
He takes 1 pill the first day, doesn't get sick. The second day, he takes 2 pills and ends up in the hospital with the exact same symptoms that Mary has. And then Kaitlyn goes on her phone and researches the side effects of colchicine poisoning. And this is somebody that's telling the police she didn't know what colchicine was.
All within this timeline.
All right, within the hours of this.
So I go back and ask you, is it possible that you believe that she did not intend, that Mary Yoder consumed the concoction
by mistake?
by mistake?
No, I don't think that.
No.
I think, and I always thought, and you know, the one thing I
Well, that would still be manslaughter, though, right? Would that be?
absolutely, because if that was our theory, we would have went with
Which
it.
is what
because
I said yesterday.
Right.
Well, that's a logical theory. Why wouldn't they
It's
have gone with
transferred
it?
intent.
Yeah.
So, for example, if I have the intent to shoot you and I miss you and I hit Andrew,
You're
I'm still guilty.
Yeah.
So, but that isn't what I believe happened, and what I really believe. And I got to tell you, I've been doing this for 25 years, and the pain that I see that's put on people the most is when they do something or cause a loved one's death. And you know what? There's nothing worse than living with the fact that your actions cause somebody else's death, especially someone you love. So what's the best way to punish somebody? Kill their loved one. And I think, and Mike Kaluza said that. I mean, when in his closing, he talked about that diabolical.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this person. I've never seen a case like this. I mean, 25 years, I've never seen anybody go out of their way to order a poison. And as Mike said in his closing, you know, she walked around the Kia, she kicked the tire of the Buick, and then she bought the Cadillac.
So you believe it was murder then?
I absolutely believe it was murder.
Okay.
But I have no problem with the jury's verdict. I believe that here's the problem. We could not prove that she wanted Mary dead. It doesn't make a lot of sense why you would kill Mary other than to really hurt Adam.
Well, that's my question is motive.
Right. But you know what? The bottom line is she was the only person there that day. She clearly ordered the colchicine, and she lied about so many things. And I think that's what really happens here. When you start looking at her interviews and her story, first of all, she says she knows where the poison is. She knows. Why would Adam tell her?
You take away the letter, you take away the planting in the car, you take away all of this. She's probably never a suspect. Is she?
If she had not sent the anonymous letter, we wouldn't be here.
Wouldn't have gone on trial.
I'll try this a third time. I botched it twice with Frank. That was what I was getting to. So the idea that the son, her boyfriend, had access to her phone, the Wi-Fi network, her laptop, the computer at work. He had access to all these things. Yet, if he was the one who carried this out, never made an effort to point the finger toward her. Right. Always used her devices, but then after the fact, never said, "Hey, why don't you look over here?" type of a thing.
Right?
Can you react to that?
Well, first of all, he didn't have access to all those things. All the evidence came back to 3 locations: her phone, her workstation, and her home. There's nothing. There was nothing on Adam's phone. There's nothing on Bill's phone. Nobody else had anything except for things that she controlled. And and then this whole thing that some way or another Adam could somehow or another get into her phone and change it. Tony Martino said that's impossible. And if you do, I guess it's called jailbreak a phone, it destroys the phone. So if I was to be able to jailbreak your phone, if I did have that ability, your phone is useless, so you'd never be able to use it again. And that didn't happen. And the only way to fix that is to reset the phone. So then you would lose everything. And we didn't have all those things. So Tony explained it. And to be honest with you, we struggled because Tony, to do it, it took 2.5 days. And we were afraid we were going to lose the jury's attention having an expert testify for 2.5 days about all these things. But, you know, what goes on in a courtroom is, in most days, there's 5 to 6 hours worth of testimony. What gets reported in the media is sometimes less than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And so what happens is a lot of times the people that come up with the conspiracy theories don't know all the evidence that was actually put out there.
Right.
They don't know the fine twists and turns. Like, for example.
Are you talking about us?
No, I'm not talking about you. but it's not your fault. It's not your fault.
Right.
It's just the way the system is.
Yeah.
But for instance, okay, one of the big things that Frank opened the door for in his opening was this alleged rape. Okay, which Adam says, I don't remember it. He doesn't say he didn't rape her. He says, I don't remember. Okay, but what's interesting about that, when she accused him in text messages, she sent him pictures of these alleged bruises. The pictures were from a time before the alleged rape even took place. The pictures weren't real.
Like a year before, I believe I read.
So why would you do that? Why would you lie about that? She said that she had an abortion. She said she had I think it's where you're pregnant and the pregnancy lands in the fallopian tubes. That's a surgical procedure to fix that. She told Adam that wasn't true. There were a lot of things that she did that makes no sense. Why would you say these things if they're not true? And then when you just look at everything, you know, the total package, there is no other proof that anybody else did this except for her. She had the opportunity to do it. And, I mean, literally, Mary went to lunch. Mary was healthy. All the people that went there said that. Mary comes back, and at 4:30, Mary starts getting deathly sick. Yeah. And, you know, and Adam was in, you know, Long Island.
I have two. Do you feel
yes,
you got that out?
Finally, thank you.
That was a good question. But these become very complicated.
Very complicated.
Were you surprised that Frank's defense was as short as it was?
You know, I it's hard to say because I've seen Frank try cases before.
It seemed a strategy to say they don't have anything.
Yeah, and I guess that was his strategy. I was somewhat surprised. I thought he was going to go down a couple different roads because he had alluded to it. We were ready for that. Like, for example, he was claiming Munchausen by proxy.
Talked about that this morning.
We actually hired an expert out of New York City to deal with that, and that expert told us, you know, this is not Munchausen's. So, we were ready for some of the things that he did. I heard him talking about lie detectors. What he doesn't talk about, that on Kaitlyn Conley's phone, we found how to beat a lie detector test. I mean, so, some of these things that,
Really?
and on top of it, and
in fairness, I've Googled that before. I have. Just out of curiosity, I Googled
I
that.
understand, but there's a lot that have been Googled.
Why do you Google that?
How and what is
I was curious.
What is interesting?
I'm serious. I've Googled that.
I am done Googling, just for the record. What is, and all computers will be melted from here on out. What is interesting, though, is to make that, and I'd be an awful jurist. Is that the because Frank had me with him, and now I'm leaning your way here all of a sudden. So it's got to be very difficult for the jury. But the point I think that is interesting is, and Manaske brought this up a little bit too, is that he never pointed the finger at her. Adam Yoder never pointed the finger at her. And for him to place all of these things on her phone and computer, etc., in the hopes that you might find it.
Right.
That she might somehow incriminate herself in the future.
Correct. That she's going to. There's a lot of leap going on there.
A lot of leap going on. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And
I want to ask you finally. You were in the courtroom when the verdict came back. Mm-hmm. You saw her face. Mm-hmm. Her face surprised me. Her mom, of course, family crushed as you would expect. This is heartbreaking on so many different levels, so many different sides. But her face, she seemed she seemed tough. Mm-hmm. I was surprised by that. I would have been crying.
I wasn't surprised by it. I wasn't surprised by it.
I mean, people act differently. People react differently.
There's other things going on too. I believe that she might have known it was coming based upon the number. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I was her attorney, I said 10-2, and now there's a verdict. 2 would have had to turn 10 around. It don't look good. Yeah. I mean, I would suspect that
in 2 hours.
Yeah, I would suspect she probably had some sort of idea what was coming.
Is that a public thing when the note comes out and says 10-2, but the attorneys know it's 10-2?
Well,
how would she have known
normally you don't see it on a note. A lot of times what'll happen is they'll just send a note out and say we're hung, or we can't come to an agreement. The jury can write anything they want on a note, and in this case they did write the number. So I wouldn't say it's common. It all depends on the foreperson of the jury, to be honest with you, what the foreperson wants to write on the note.
The attorneys can know what's on the note?
We have to know what's on the note. The judge has to show us the note, and then based upon the note, we have the right to ask for certain things. So, and then obviously you can object to it. So, for instance, if he's going to give an Allen charge, then after he gets done, after the jury goes back and to start deliberating again, the first thing the judge says is, do the people have any objections to the court's charge? And you can either say yes or no. And if you say no, then he would go on and he asks the defense, do you have any objections to that charge? And if he has an objection, he can put it on the record. But an Allen charge in that circumstance where a note comes out, hung jury is the appropriate response.
Okay. And then finally, I'd like to ask you just procedure. He says he's going to appeal. He's going to try to appeal the fact that bail was revoked. That will come down the road after the holidays. But in the event, let's say that the fact that you brought in the lesser charge, the appellate court ruled against you. And so what would happen then? Would that mean that she would be found to be not guilty and you could not try her again for the purpose of it would be double jeopardy? What would happen?
Yeah, I'm making a guess here, but I would believe, without doing the research on it, that if they were to say that the manslaughter in the first degree was an inappropriate charge, then they would vacate the conviction and there would be nothing left.
That would be the end.
And it would be the end. But I really don't see that happening. I think it's clearly a lesser included. We clearly were entitled to. That's clear.
I think that's where he's going to go.
That's where he's going to go, and I can understand that. Yeah. But
boy, just intriguing because it's hard for us. It's hard for any human to. We tend to. When we agree with things, we bring up hypothetical situations. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, you learn about a person there because we can only come up with things that we could see ourselves doing.
And that's the problem.
That
with
makes
this
it difficult
case.
here. I could not find myself anywhere in the world where I would do something like this, so it's hard for me to conceive.
And that's why I give the jury a lot of credit. One of the things that I always tell my assistants, you can't say to yourself, well, I was the defendant, I would have done this. You're not in the defendant's chair. And and I give the jury a lot of credit. And I think they really paid a lot of attention to the trial. It was a 3-week trial. There's a lot of evidence that came in, and there was a lot of putting the things together. And I give, obviously I give Lori Lisi an incredible amount of praise to continuing to work on this case. This is a hard case. As a prosecutor, the easiest thing to do when this case comes to your desk is say we don't have enough and move on to something easier. And she didn't do that. She dug in and she kept looking. And when it started off, we were looking at Bill, and then we were looking at Adam. And so she worked very hard on this for years. And then they chose to have Mike Kaluza give the closing argument, and I think that was a great decision. One of the things that Mike brings to the table is he's not overly excitable.
He's not frank.
Right. And
there was a definite contrast.
Right. And I think that worked out. I think that contrast, and plus Mike's
Did you hear that the opposite was the case in the last trial? Because that's the story going around. That
yes, I did hear that. And in this case, I think Mike did a very good job. Mike is very good at connecting the dots too, and not getting emotional.
3
about
hours,
it.
by the way. Yeah.
And it's hard to keep someone's attention for 3 hours. And
trust me, we know.
And and the other thing with Mike too is, and that's why I think it was a great team, and I think they did a good job, and they divided it up. One thing about Mike is he actually teaches closing arguments to prosecutors throughout the whole state. So you're taking somebody that has an incredible amount of knowledge on how to do it, how to use the the PowerPoint projector to do those things, and I just think the whole team, and they were able to divide up the work even more with Mike on it, and that gave Stacy more time to spend with Tony Martino. Tony Martino's testimony was the key, and that was because Stacy spent all the time with him, and we kept going back. And one of the things that we found was she researched other poisons. We didn't know that the first time. Who researches other poisons, and who's looking for poisons that you can't find a trace for?
The discovery of the backup.
That was huge. The backup, I think the backup was the key.
Very interesting case, and love being the armchair quarterback there. And tell Mike Kaluza that doing a free money question midway through the 3-hour period really works for us. People love it.
I'll tell them
they love it. I'm sure that the jury would love it as well. Great job.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on.